There's like an infinite number of ways to do things, even if you're going to stay in the system. But not everybody can like move to Guatemala and start a commune. And not everybody wants to. But you can reimagine what's possible for you in the system you're inside of.
Welcome, dear Rosa. I am so happy to have you here, and welcome to all of you who are listening to this, to another episode of About Her. I am very excited that we can have a talk today about willpower, about discipline, about a life where we don't need to force things, but we can like actually allow things. And yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Before, Rosa, I would love to give you a little bit of space to just share whatever you want to share about yourself, what comes to mind, where you, just introduce yourself in the way you feel called to.
Sure. First, I want to say thank you, Anna, for having me today. I am Rosa Hope. I am a PhD astrophysicist, but I'm also a lifelong mystic. So I have spent all my adult years studying both the stars and the soul. And that's given me a really unique perspective. And in an interesting way, studying the universe has brought me very much back down to earth. Over the years, I've really discovered, I've delved into the deep nitty-gritty details of spirituality and of physics and astrophysics. And at the end of the day, I've come to realize, especially in my own life, but in many other people's lives too, that the details matter way less than how we live our lives every single day. It's about what we're doing here. It's about the work we're doing here and how we navigate our human experience. So I'm excited to have this discussion with you today about discipline and forcing, because coming from academia, I have lived that path and know where it leads and have had such a rewarding experience rediscovering flow and rediscovering being gentle with myself and giving myself grace and what that has looked like for me.
Wow. That reminds me of something you said before we hit record, which is like this, the way we live as a collective that kind of brought us to this point where we said like, okay, no, that's not what we want to do anymore. And I feel sometimes it kind of seems to be necessary for us to learn is to dive deep into the shadow aspect of forcing, like you say, in academics and in like normal quote unquote workspaces where there's a lot of push, a lot of force, a lot of hustle. And then we can come back to like, okay, no, I don't want that. And how could it look like if I opt out of that? If I say like, okay, no more of that. I want to live my life in the way I'm meant to live my life and not live up to the expectation of whom or whatever most of the time. So like I wished, I'm very idealistic. I wished we humans will find a way to like not dive deep into the shadow aspect, but enjoy the light aspect from the start. But unfortunately, we seem to like have to have gone through a lot of this force. And I think it's very necessary to like talk about the different ways we can ease out of that. Like you say, the gentleness, like being gentle with yourself, with your family that surrounds you, with the way you learn and live and actually like enjoy life and not just kind of live it through Monday to Friday and then enjoy maybe a little bit of the weekend. There's so much more
Right.
richness to discover.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot. So this brought up a lot as you were speaking. But the first thing I thought of, there's kind of this metaphor that I think first came from the author C.S. Lewis. He was kind of a Christian mystic a little bit, very strong faith. So, take it with a grain of salt. But he believed, at least for a time, that suffering was how the light gets in. And the way he talked about it is like we are these unfinished blocks of marble. And our suffering is like this divine, like hammer and chisel, chiseling away this rough, unfinished block of marble to reveal the perfection within. And the way I thought about this metaphor the first time I heard it, because I do believe that to some degree, but I think there are different ways we can go about it. So, for example, in my 20s, I was taking my rough block of marble and just kind of throwing myself down the mountain. And as it hits the mountainside at these random impact points, it's slowly perfecting me, but in this really painful and chaotic way. And then after I everyone kind of goes through their spiritual awakening or whatever. After I had my Saturn return and everything
Mm.
got kind of burned down and recycled, and then I kind of built back again. Once I kind of understood what I was in the middle of, once I had understood that I was being called to a path, for lack of a better word, and I'd been resisting against that path because my take was like, I want to do what I want to do. The ego wants to do what it wants to do in life. And then spirit is kind of saying, okay, but you kind of paid the price for doing. So I wanted to be free. I wanted to do whatever I wanted. And what I started to realize was that by not following the call, my soul's call or my soul's purpose, I was just introducing a lot of extra suffering in my life that was unnecessary. And once I began to answer the call, not that it was easy or that any of this is meant to be easy, but I found a lot more fulfillment and a lot less unnecessary just suffering of my own making. That stuff kind of started to abate. And the way I think about it now is that I'm still this unfinished block of marble slowly being chipped away, but I have more agency and understanding now. So I am sort of like a co-sculptor with my higher self or with the universe, where it's like I can kind of say, I'm ready to work on this part of me. And so we start chipping away at that point and like doing the work over here. And then I'll say, okay, that feels good for now. Let's balance this out. I'm ready to work over here now. And then we start chipping away there. And it's not that some random thing comes up anyway. Sometimes life comes at you and says, address this now. And it's kind of your prerogative to say, like, okay, if you have the bandwidth. But it's the difference between throwing yourself down the mountain and like being kind of a co-creator or co-sculptor, helping, having the self-awareness to know the parts of yourself that need to be worked on, or little sticking points or distortions that you should address. Or, for example, we were talking about narratives. What our society or economy or cultural system, these narratives that we are taught growing up about how we should live or who we should be or how work should feel and things like that, and taking the time to deconstruct those narratives and ask, well, how much of this is actually true? And how much of this is a role or a box that I've been put in that I've been struggling against all this
Mm.
time?
Mm. Yes. Yes. I love the picture.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I am a very visual person, so I could literally see the block falling down. And it's such a beautiful analogy. And I agree on that with the raising of the self-awareness that so many of us, at least like in the age we're in, didn't have as our younger versions. But like with the raise of awareness where you say like, oh, okay, well, that's something that where I limit myself or where there's some deconditioning to be made because this is just not fitting me anymore. And actually, I am called to something else or I am something else. So with the awareness, we can actually say like, let's work over here and go into this co-creation mode. But before, I feel a lot of people are in this place of, let's call it being lost and kind of stumbling through life and saying like, okay, that's not me. No, that's not me. I've tried that. That hurts really bad. So I retreat back,
Mhm.
opening up your heart in a relationship, then being heartbroken. Then it's like, I will never, ever, the same thing happens with work. And then, of course, there's no never, ever. But I feel the point that is very interesting is the one where we start a spiritual awakening or start realizing that we do have the power to say like, let's slow down this wounding path or this like suffering path, or let's look over here instead of feeling vulnerable and open everywhere all the time, but kind of, yeah, come to a more gentle approach, as you said before, to say like, let's look at here, but then take a step back and see how beautiful everything already is, and not just go into this a shadow that I see a lot in spirituality is this hyperfixation on self-development out of a lack to say like, I'm not good enough, I'm not healed,
Right.
or whatever healed might mean. And it comes out of this lack of, I'm not good the way I am, so I need to kind of perfect myself. And
Right.
that's again, like that's kind of not the right angle to go about. So this moment where you realize like, oh, I could do it differently. Like, how did you make the shift? I think that's very, very profound moment to realize, oh, I can actually have something to do. I actually have something to say in my own life.
Well, this is, I mean, I keep, my head is sort of spinning as you're speaking because I'm thinking of all sorts of different things. So, one of the things you brought up that really struck me is this idea of like perfecting ourselves. I hear you. And I've had this discussion in depth before. The thing that's sticky about this is that for most people, spiritual awakening or the growth of self-awareness comes from discomfort. It begins or it is triggered by the fact that we feel something's wrong or something's not working or we feel lost or this lack of a sense of purpose. And so in a way, there's a little bit of a paradox in this because humans oftentimes need to be backed into a corner to do something about anything. Okay. I think that goes without saying, but it's true with some of this work too, is that a lot of people, most people, as you mentioned before, have to go through the shadow and the pain in order to be motivated enough to do the big work, like capital B, capital W, big work of our souls, big work as our purpose, that sort of thing. And but the issue is that starts, the pain and the suffering, of course, makes us feel lack or despair or whatever is going on. But then we're also saying on the other side of this, all is well.
Yeah.
And all shall be well. And you are perfect exactly the way you are. You're perfect and whole. You're already free. And the neophyte is saying, I am not free and I am not whole and I am not, like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? So there are these different levels of, I don't want to say like levels of understanding because it's not really about a hierarchy or something like that. There are different perspectives that we have access to based on where our headspace is at. And I think that's part of this conversation too, is understanding even in a place where we're having a real hard time. Today stinks. I hate my job. It's not a fit. My relationship is having problems or whatever's going on. Can you be in that and acknowledge those valid feelings of disappointment and struggle and access the part of yourself that feels all is well and all shall be well? You can't find that. You can't access that if you're pushing and fighting. I think that's kind of the core of this entire conversation, is if you're pushing and fighting and struggling, that is sitting inside the dual thing. I don't have this and I want that. And you have to be able to melt that somewhere in your mind, somewhere in your experience. You have to be able to melt that down. Well, maybe this is why astrophysics kind of helped me in this way, because when you're thinking on a cosmic scale, your car trouble is no big deal. So like it's about this perspective. It's about being able to shift outside of the immediate and see the bigger picture a little bit. But again, very difficult to communicate that to someone who's in the thick of it right now, especially if it's not of their own making, so to speak. Sometimes we create our own problems. That was me in my 20s. I was like, if things were too calm, I will create a hurricane. Watch me. Okay. But there are people in the world that are dealing with oppressive or exploitative systems, governments, families. There are times when it's not something that our conscious mind created or put ourselves in, but we still have to find a way to keep going. We still have to find a way to navigate whatever our circumstances actually are, which is why we're in pursuit of this peace, why we're in pursuit of this space where we can float and flow and be with ourselves and experience presence. But we do need to be able to check out of the struggle long enough to find it. Now, as far as this thing, like we're sort of already perfect, we're already free, the ego self or the personality is not experiencing that. So let's just go ahead and own that and say, okay, I am not experiencing my consciousness as a liberated and totally enlightened being. I'm still incarnated. I'm hanging out with y'all. And because we're all here together, there ain't that much hierarchy. Like, everybody here is pretty close, generally speaking. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right? But what we're talking about is the larger aspect of self, the higher self or the superconscious self or the origin self that
Mm.
this little tiny spark of individuation comes from. That is the part that's free, that's always been free, that is perfect in its wholeness. But we can't experience physical reality. We can't experience the contrasts and the way of creating with physical matter. We can't do that from that perspective. We can only do that here. So, in a sense, incarnating, although it can feel very challenging and very restrictive, is an opportunity to do something we couldn't do any other way.
Mm.
And so we're trying to find our way to seeing it in that way, and not giving ourselves over to its difficulty, not beating ourselves up either. Some of us are coming from academia. I have worked with some of the smartest people on planet Earth. And inside of the structure of academia and the research world, they get ground down into hamburger meat. And I've seen them depressed and feeling like they're the dumbest people on earth because of the system and the process you have to go through to come out the other side and have a career. Isn't that wild?
It is.
There are so many aspects to the way our systems work that are just inhumane. They're extractive and they're meant to beat us down and keep us keep us away, separated from our power. Because there are people, well, now I'm getting on my soapbox. Watch out, everybody. Be careful, Rosa.
Good.
Look, there are very few people that hold the majority of wealth extracted from our planet. Isn't that wild? We don't have to allow that. There's billions of us.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't have to do things in a way that continues and perpetuates this type of structure. We can do things differently. You can do things differently. Does it mean disappointing people in your family or your friends? Does it mean losing some of your friends? Does it mean having to radically reimagine what your life might look like and no more like keeping up with the Joneses? Totally, because if you want to keep up with the Joneses, you got to play the Joneses game. And if you don't like it, and if you're not winning that game, maybe it's okay to take your ball and go home.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have like about 100 things. Let's see how many I remember. Thank you. First of
I'm
all,
salty this morning.
you are. What comes to me very strongly while you talked is, I think maybe it's a universal joke. I always take it as one, is this polarity aspect that comes in so strong from both sides. And I feel what is really, really important for us incarnated souls right here is to kind of remember that we hold the power to actually look at things from this and this perspective at the same time. Because most of us are like, that's right or that's wrong. And there's nothing in between. But what we actually do, like, I have always the visual of kind of a vessel or a valley. And in between is this lying aid where we dance and we go this way and then we go this way. And then we kind of gather our data from all of these sides to merge into the sweet spot. But most of society in general, or non-playing characters, or however you want to call them, us in a big like bottle, we are unconscious of that. So it's like you're either right or wrong. It's either good or bad. You're either forcing or allowing to wash things over you. So like this sweet spot in the middle, that is what I feel is when this awareness comes in and we actually go like, no, I don't have to participate in that. I feel exploited. I feel, however, overworked, overwhelmed, burned out from the society we live in. How to get out of it, this access to the, let's say, like the divine information or the information from your higher self, your intuition, basically. If we don't trust we have that as incarnated soul, then it's very hard to say like, okay, I don't like, what should I do about it? I have to. And then there comes the victimhood in and we go into this black and white thinking again of saying like, oh, but I have to endure it. I have to work 3 jobs because otherwise I can't pay my rent. And I am a strong believer in we have chosen that.
Mm-hmm.
We are here in this very moment, in this state, in this part of the country, in this whatever system we're in, because our souls chose that consciously, but now we don't remember. So it's our
Yeah.
job to like kind of come back to that. And yes, it's hard. I agree on what you said. If you tell that to someone who is really struggling with a very heavy, maybe traumatic situation, and you say like, well, you chose it, so your responsibility anyways. That's not helping. So
Right.
I feel sometimes it's about introducing this awareness. That's how I see the universe's job often, is to introduce it in a very like trickly way, not all at once, because most of humans couldn't handle it, because that
That's
would be
right.
much too much. And that is something
Yeah.
that I'm struggling with since my early childhood, because I've remembered everything until 5. And I was speaking with the angels and everything was so clear, and I knew my purpose. And then like I kind of looked out and said like, the other people aren't doing that, so maybe that's looks like I'm wrong. What you said about the academics, kind of, questioning myself. And this whole struggle that then led to me remembering myself was built out of the pain of being totally lost, or how you
Mhm.
described it, kind of pushing myself down a hill, to kind of see, who am I? What should I do? And only in this part of remembering that came back the consciousness of, I actually choose that, and actually everything is kind of super well and totally okay, and I'm already whole. But the perspective was so hard to keep, the human and the higher perspective at the same time. And if they intercommunicate, like sometimes it's just a lot to deal with both of these aspects, to not overwhelm,
Right.
to not bypass. So that
Right.
is a question that I would love to ask you, maybe because I've struggled so much with it, is to say like how to balance in the
Mhm.
sweet spot between what the ego wants and where the higher self says, well, you have access to everything. You're already whole. So what's the struggle here?
Right. Well, I have sort of a fairly simple exercise that I share, but I also want to say that being able to sit with nuance and to be able to sit with conflicting truths
Hmm.
is like a muscle you build over time. So we are not the way we're raised and the way Western culture is, we really like the simplicity of right and wrong and like good and bad. It's like we like that because it's comfortable and it's easy and we can like stick it in a bucket and pretend we understand it. But social and cultural and emotional and psychological maturity and even spiritual maturity is shown by your ability to hold these things at the same time. It's a yes and approach instead of an either or approach. And that can be really tricky, especially since there's a lot of BS out there and a lot of like manipulation and stuff like that. It's like, can we just hold that everything's true? That's not what I'm saying. So you need discernment to balance your yes and,
Mm.
right? And also remember that if something feels fishy to you, it probably is. So, but how do we empower ourselves? How do we learn how to trust our intuition? Issue being that most people's intuition is like a limp noodle because they haven't been using it in a long time. So, trusting yourself, unfortunately, when you're just starting out with this, is more like trusting your programming, which can be a problem. You don't want to trust your biases. You don't want to trust your programming if it's based on a value system that you don't agree with. So, step one, well, I mean, we're getting into stuff that I like tell the people I'm working with, but y'all get to hear it today. Step one is to really identify your values and do a major house cleaning on them. Because most of the things you think are important, most of the things that you want to operate from are not going to match your culture's values or your parents' values or even your spouse's values. And so that's where I begin with everybody, because if you know what your values are, you will always have your compass.
Mm.
And when your intuition is still weak, shall we say, that compass of your values will get you started. Okay. But what you have to do to strengthen that is to commit to making your decisions in your life. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we don't have control of, or you're still in a place where I have to do this or I have to do that. What if we just say, okay, there's some stuff you have to do. There's other places in your life where you have a choice. So focus where you do have a choice that you're aware of. Let's start there. And every time you're making a decision, make that decision from your values, not from the outcome, not from your emotions per se, but from your values that you have identified. So nothing is random, nothing is slapdash. You know what your values are, and you're choosing in accordance with those values. So that means you're living with integrity now. So when you start there, you'll begin to notice that your intuition is speaking to you more and more loudly. What's happening is that using the compass of your values is allowing you space to do the right thing and begin to hear and understand how your intuition is actually the root of the values you actually hold in your heart. It is the root of those things. So you're kind of working backwards in this practical way in order to gain access to that deeper knowing that can guide you. There was something else you mentioned too, which is balance. How do we balance these like different aspects? So when I think about like forcing and pushing or trying to use willpower to change, that is a very kind of masculine way of doing things. As an academic, everything was the masculine way of doing things in that field. And so I've been very deep in all of that. And I don't want to malign it completely, because in some ways, no projects would ever get done without some of that masculine energy, particularly at the end when it's not fun anymore. Finishing a project requires some of that. So I'm never going to throw it all the way out. However, that being said, we are in a place now where it's almost like it's becoming harmful if it's the only set of tools you have. Because it means you're I'm trying to choose my words gently. You're pushing against things all the time, and so you're weakening yourself. We can't use those tools all the time. And in fact, I think this is something you've talked about before, Anna, which is when you're trying to use willpower or force to change something in yourself, when you don't have any bandwidth, it's not working. And that's actually your little indicator, that's your little alarm bell that's saying this is the wrong tool for the job. We need rest too, and we need nurture. We need space and grace. We need stillness and care, because without all of that, we can't replenish ourselves. Whatever you're pulling from in those moments when you are pushing needs to be replenished. And for me, that's what balance is about. I still really love my masculine aspect because it has helped me achieve incredible things that I'm very proud of. I've also hurt myself pushing in the past. And so I know the price that we pay when we have an over-reliance on that one way of doing things. And so my journey, especially coming out of my PhD, was relearning how to care for myself, how to give myself space, and to rest, learning how to really rest. And out of rest came pleasure, which is something that I hadn't really experienced for like most of my PhD process. I'd just been working too hard. But in learning how to rest, I discovered there were things that I could do like for fun, for my own pleasure, my own interests. Like I started reading not for work, but like for fun. And I went back to dancing. I go to dance class now. It's not just my kid who has activities. Now I have activities too, right? But it's these things that support my well-being, not as a punishment to myself. You know how some people go to the gym to like punish their body into being hot? Stop it. Stop it.
Yes.
You're on fire. You're already hot. Do what feels good. And for me, I learned that being on a treadmill, I was like, I am not a hamster. This is not working for me. It's joyless. And if it's joyless, I'm done. But what do I love doing? I love to dance. I love to feel music in my body. I love to master an expression. of something else, or to allow my own expression. I love doing other people's choreography, and I kind of like making up my own thing too. But it's something that is not supposed to do anything. I'm not going to go be a ballerina or something. It's just something I like. And so having more of that in our lives, allowing ourselves to have more of that. Again, if you're one of those like productivity hackers, you still should do this because it's refueling you, it's replenishing you. And I'm like, God forbid you're a productivity hacker, but that's just where some people are, right? Mm, I'm happy for you if it helps you in the things you're trying to do. I think my goal ultimately is to help people rebuild their self trust, which you were doing. But the reason I want to help people rebuild self trust is because it helps us experience more peace, more self assurance, understanding that when faced with a decision, we're not lost anymore. We know exactly where to go. And if you're feeling lost, go back to your values and be like, based on these, what is the right move? And that can feel really scary because it means a lot of times the outcome is not accessible to us. It means we don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict what will happen because we're not choosing based on outcome anymore. We're choosing based on our values. But what you will always have when you choose from your values is the peace that comes from an integrous life.
Mm.
And there's no other way to get that.
I love that very much. And thank you so much for making that clear, because I feel out of various reasons of this fast life that we collectively living is that people tend to forget their values and they kind of just react, not just to like kind of lower that, but reaction is so common. And then maybe a month, a week, a year, a decade later, you think like, oh, why did I actually do it? It wasn't aligned with me. So the values weren't present in that moment, but to come back to them. And I agree totally. The pleasure and inner peace it gives you to act out of your authenticity, out of your soul's calling, out of your values, there's nothing better you can actually get. So to take it, it's in your own power and also in your own responsibility. And with that, I think kind of if we step out a little bit bigger in that, that's where the masculine and feminine energies that you talked about come in. And thank you very much for not demonizing the masculine energy. I've seen that a lot lately. Okay, well, I totally admit we have gone quite overboard on the masculine energy collectively, like much too much. But that doesn't mean that it's initially bad or the wrong thing to do. It's more about we have just leaned on that much too much. And so it's about coming maybe like a little bit to the feminine side, but then like at one point or another, balancing in the middle and say like you say, masculine energy gives you so much. So it's an amazing thing to access. It's an amazing energy to tap in, but with the other part of resting, of femininity, of flow, of accessing your intuition before your logic. So it's more about the balance than about the energy
Exactly.
itself. So that is something that
Exactly.
I feel is often kind of misunderstood. It's like, oh, I was too long in my masculine. Now I'm doing it all.
Yeah, but you don't want to fix an overcorrection with
Yes.
another
Yes.
overcorrection.
And that's what a lot of time happens. I've talked about this in the last weeks very much when it comes to habits. That's how we connected in the forcing and the pushing, because I've seen so many of my clients coming to me saying like, I wanted to implement this for so long and I haven't. So now I'm going to make it up by pushing extra hard. And while that logically is totally understandable, it just does not work 99% of the time, I feel. So it's again like balancing out masculinity with masculinity, and that doesn't work.
Right.
At least in this sense, minus and minus isn't going to be a plus. So it's about, again, the awareness that we've talked about, to say like, oh, now I'm working on this part of myself, but I choose to do it in a gentle way. I can use both the masculine, I choose to work on this, and the gentle female in the space and the time and the gentleness that is necessary. And that's where I feel we get into this creative sweet spot that you so wonderfully pointed out as inner peace. Here's where I'm doing or being or embodying what my soul actually came here to know, to experience, to kind of get a feeling for. And that's where it gets pleasurable, which is
Mhm.
the whole thing that we're here for, isn't it?
Sure. Well, and I think the piece that I mean, it's like I'm kind of realizing it now that just while I'm talking to you is that I couldn't access maybe, well, it's like pleasure can be a little bit of a sexy word and like, yes, that, but not only that. So I
Uh-huh.
guess what I'm really talking about is enjoyment. I couldn't access enjoyment of my human experience when I was run ragged. And that's why rest came first. I couldn't get there without resting first. So, and another thing about this is that, a lot of the work I've done over the last decade has been highly technical. I've been coding for a long time, and I can think of so many times where I'm wrestling with some problem in my code and I will be banging my head against it. I will stay up all night working on it. I cannot fix it until I finally get so angry I abandon it and just stop working and take a day off. Go outside, work in the garden, or just like stay in bed and read a book or whatever. Just like not work on it. Give myself some space to rest, to process my frustration. And then I'll come back after resting and I'll fix it in an hour. That has happened so many
Mm.
times. And I think that's part of this. It's like you need to gain an understanding of when it's the right tool for the job. So sometimes rest and flow and nurture is absolutely what is needed. And you can probably tell that it's needed because you feel like you're banging your head on the wall. So there you go. Done. I'm glad I fixed that for you. Now you know. Like when you feel that way, it's time to invite in your feminine tools. But again, still, I stand by what I said though, which is that especially when you're working on bigger projects in your business, in your life, even if you're crafty, like I like to knit also. So I love crafting, I love gardening, but there's like the fun part that's closer to the beginning of the project when you're still feeling inspired and you
Mhm.
have this vision and you're like, okay, I know what it's going to be like. Like I was knitting a little stuffy for my kid and it's so cute and I'm knitting everything and it's looking all great. But the end of the project, there's no more knitting now.
Mm.
You just have to sit there for hours and sew it all together and it is lame. It is not fun. It's boring. You can't even like watch TV because you have to like look at what you're doing. And so there's always this resistance to that part of the project is when you're finishing or when you're cleaning up. Like no one likes to clean up after the fun part, right? I deal with this with my kid also, which is that the cleaning up is like
Yeah.
not the fun part. But that is when your masculine is the right tool for the job because you understand that it's not the part you like are attracted to because it's not particularly enjoyable, but it's something that still needs to happen to to finish this creation in the physical. What you have done is magical. Knitting a stuffy that was a ball of yarn and now it's something that your child loves is being a magician. You have made something not from nothing, but you know what I'm saying. Your idea and then your creative energy has gone into creating this thing, but no one's going to be able to enjoy it if it's unfinished. So that's one of those moments where it's like the feminine helps you with your creation and with your ideation, and then the masculine helps you with those little details that are required to get to the
Mhm.
finish line. So, this goes back to, I harp on about like integration all the time, and this word means 100 different things. But this is the perfect example of when it means bringing two things together and knitting them together, being able to bring your masculine and feminine aspects and tools into harmony with one another is how the thing happens. And what you're teaching is so important because in our In Western culture, the feminine has been so repressed
Mm.
and suppressed and oppressed for so long that we don't even know what those tools are. And some of these like puritanical ideas actually teach us that feminine tools and feminine experience are like wrong or
Yeah.
bad or lazy or any number of those things. And it's time to let all that stuff go. Those people are scared. They're scared of what femininity means. They're scared of what receptivity means. But it's actually just part of being like a healthy individual.
Yeah.
Being able to encompass both of those things in a balanced and harmonious way.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I totally know what you're saying. And I love very much the way you speak about the tools, because I just came to realize while you were talking that I feel that many of us collectively, and definitely a past version of me, have, how to say it, defined the masculine tools as the only tools, but to like kind of see femininity as a tool in itself, to counterbalance the masculine tools. I feel that is something that needs to be like really worked on and brought awareness to say like, okay, rest is not unproductive. Your creative knitting is not just a cute little thing you do. Like, there's always this devaluing, like at least where I live in Europe, that has been there for a long time. That's how sweet is that? The femininity has always been like very belittled in a way. And therefore, it's not even recognized as a tool. So I feel it's a lot of redefining and re-looking at these qualities. And then we come back to your values, of course, to say like, okay, what is important for me and how can I kind of come into balance in these various aspects, and don't say this is more important than this, but kind of like equal them out and say like, it's very important for me to knit, to be creative, to paint, to whatever. I love sewing, so to do that, even without an outcome that does have any means or would bring me money, just out of the joy of doing things and seeing that as equally important as, I don't know, writing a messaging for my next sales page for my next offer, which would be the masculine, totally unfun part for me. But both of them are important to kind of be a human being balanced in the middle and not just a robot for productivity or following.
Yeah, well, you are not a sales machine, right? Like you're a human being. And I think that's part of what might be lost in this. I'm so happy to reframe the conversation, by the way, in order to bring these things into parity and to show that both are should be equally valued in our society and in ourselves as individuals. But like, what are we doing? We're not here to make money or be productive. We do need to sustain ourselves, and be able to like eat and survive and that kind of thing. But man, capitalism, okay? I'm just on it this morning. Here I go. We have been taught that things only have value because of what type of money they can draw in or be exchanged for. And there's a deeper issue here that we see in the fact that teachers, like in the United States, get paid less than managers of fast food chains, okay? That's some realness. That is an example of the issue with value. Like, I'm not talking about like personal values. I'm talking about value like dollars and cents value in Western culture. That's ridiculous, right? Because it's like the people who are educating the next generation that are going to be the means of production for rich people should be heavily valued, right? Because it's like a highly educated workforce means the creation of better technology and blah, blah, blah. So even from an economic standpoint, teachers should be valued higher, but you can't directly show that what a teacher does leads to profit. And so they don't make any money. There's no shareholders. There's no impetus in this economic system to pay them more, frankly. So this is a reflection on the personal level, too, and the fact that creative endeavors and, in fact, creative careers are devalued. Caregiving careers are devalued because they can't be connected to profit the way being in tech or something like that can be. And I think this is a pox on our society, right? Because it essentially means that we are being taught from a very early age that our life experience doesn't matter. Only what we can produce for money matters. And I could not be more out of sync with that idea. You are stuck with yourself. You are the only thing you actually have control over. Are you really going to define your experience based on money you can make? Like, what is that even about? It's your experience. What is your day like? What do you want your days to be like? Like that's the middle of, that's the center, that is the kernel of living a fulfilling and meaningful life, is having a good understanding of what actually matters to you. What's going to make your experience here more enjoyable? You are absolutely allowed to do something just because you like it. Come on. If you work for a company, your boss is not going to go out of their way to make sure that you feel fulfilled, because that's not their job. It's their job to make money for the company, not even for themselves. Like, this whole thing is a mess, y'all. So, like, forget all of that. That stuff is a story. That stuff is a man-made structure that probably isn't going to last much longer. Bigger conversation. Think about your experience, your internal experience of your own life. You feeling pretty good about it? Fantastic. Tell your friends how you did it. Are you feeling really bad about it? Like it's not going great right now? Figure out why. Go inside and say, what am I doing that's giving me the ick? Is my job giving me the ick? That means it's probably not in alignment with my values. Is my relationships giving me the ick? There's something going on there. There's something to look into. Get curious about what the issue is. Don't just say, this is how it has to be. This is what I have to do. Because, like, sometimes it's true. It's like, I need to pay my mortgage or I'll lose my house. That's just a fact, right? But, like, these are bigger issues than that. You need to, well, I keep saying this, radical reimagining of what your life can actually look like. There is not one way to do things. There's like an infinite number of ways to do things, even if you're going to stay in the system. I'm not saying you can, like, but not everybody can, like, move to Guatemala and start a commune. And not everybody wants to. Yeah. But you can reimagine what's possible for you in the system you're inside of and get curious about that and start to think about it and start to use those areas where you do have a choice to start moving the needle. It is not a done deal that your life has to suck. It's not. But you got to do something. Well, of course, now I'm going the other side. I'm like, you got to do something about it. And by do something about it, I mean rest.
Point blank, I think we need to stop here because this is the perfect ending, even though I have like about 100 more things I would love to discuss with you. But yes.
Gosh, Anna, you woke me up early this morning. Here it is. My gosh.
I love that. Thank you. That is so beautiful. And I deeply love the passion that and the clarity that you speak about the way we can empower ourselves. I think that is very amazing. And it's very important to sometimes really get it straight into the face. Because normally, like, you know, one of the channels that I love, he always says, like, humans are masters of limitation. And I couldn't agree more on this. Normally what happens after a speech like this is like someone saying, but I have to do this because there is no other way. And it's just, you know, belittling ourselves again. So no. That's not the only way.
Yeah. Get creative.
Get creative.
Radical reimagining.
And it could be so much fun. Like if you reimagine your life not out of lack, but out of like, how many other ways are there to do things? It could be actually a lot of fun to just reassessing what you could do different. It can be such a fun process. And that's always something that I love to come back to is like shadow work or kind of changing your life in any ways or means does not have to be a draining thing. It could be actually quite a beautiful process if you don't go there from this little victimhood that says like, oh my God, I'm the poorest soul in the world. And if I could ever change, then it must be through hardship. Because that's not true.
No, no. And actually, once you get more into it, it stops being about that. You have so much more agency to decide where you want to grow. You do have to kind of get over the hump first. It's true. So, for most, not everyone, but for most people, it does start from this place of hardship and victimhood because life is not going very well. But, let your life be your big project. Not even your business, like your life. Let your life and your lifestyle be your big project. Because then the only question is like, how? How could I make this work? And I'm not talking about flights of fancy. I've seen some people in containers that I've joined that take this radical reimagining on as like, I'm going to be a billionaire and own a yacht. And I'm like, no,
Really?
that's not what I'm talking about. And it's not about being realistic. It's not that. It's that you're focusing on the wrong thing. Because again, you're in that narrative that's about money and stuff. And I'm saying, get over that. It's about your experience. How do you want to feel? How do you want your days to feel? What do you actually need? Because, boy, you will free yourself if you can discover how few your needs actually are.
So,
Because if you can start there, it means you can build out almost anything you want.
so true. Thank you so much. This is so lovely. I will
Yeah, I've been
stop
so
here.
intense today.
I love that very much. I love the fiery aspect. That's very necessary and very
Yeah.
beautiful.
I must have got struck by lightning or something because, like, this was not the vibe yesterday, but man, it came for me
It
today.
came out today for the perfect time for this recording, and that's very beautiful.